The steel rails carrying commuter trains into London are buckling, not because of a flaw in their composition, not because of a defect in their installation. They are bending because the air temperature has exceeded the fundamental engineering assumptions of Britain's entire rail network. As of late June 2026, the Met Office has issued a red extreme heat warning to the public for 3 consecutive days. This has never happened in June before. In county after county, speed restrictions are imposed, then services are canceled entirely. Passengers are left stranded on platforms, not because of industrial action, but because the physical tracks beneath them have become warped and unsafe in the sunlight. The country that invented the railway is discovering that its climate has rendered parts of it inoperable. But here is the detail that tells the real story. The steel used in the United Kingdom's rail system is pre-tensioned or stressed for an ambient air temperature of 27 degrees Celsius. It is a number that for over a century represented a sensible, reliable upper limit for a typical British summer day. On the 19th of July 2022, a weather station in Coningsby, Lincolnshire, recorded a temperature of 40.3 degrees Celsius, the 40-degree barrier, a figure once considered a distant theoretical possibility for the late 21st century, was breached. When air temperatures reach the high 30s, the surface of a steel rail can exceed 50 degrees Celsius, over 122 degrees Fahrenheit. At that temperature, thermal expansion is no longer a minor variable. It is a powerful kinetic force, one that pushes and contorts the metal, creating undulations in tracks that were laid perfectly straight. To understand what is happening to Britain, you have to understand the collision of 2 forces. One is a rapidly warming climate. The other is a national infrastructure built for a world that no longer exists. The nation's chief climate modelers and weather forecasters are grappling with this divergence daily. Professor Penny Endersby, the first woman to serve as chief executive of the Met Office, now oversees a team whose projections are becoming reality decades ahead of schedule. Her colleague, Professor Richard Betts, head of climate impacts research at the Met Office Hadley Center, has been one of the leading voices articulating this new danger. His work confirms that human-caused climate change is making these heat extremes not just hotter, but vastly more probable. An event that was once a 1 in 1,000-year occurrence is now a 1 in 10, or even a 1 in 5. The heat itself is only the first part of the crisis. The second, more insidious part, is what happens when a nation built on the certainty of rain suddenly begins to run out of water. This is the Great British Water Paradox. An island famous for its gray skies and persistent drizzle is now facing systemic water shortages. The reason is not a lack of rain over the long term, it is a catastrophic failure of capture and distribution. In the last 30 years, not a single new reservoir has been built in England by the private water companies. While the population has grown and climate change has made rainfall patterns more volatile, record wet winters followed by bone-dry summers, the country's ability to store that winter water for the summer has remained stagnant. This is the part the headlines do not capture. The water is not just failing to be stored, it is being actively lost. Right now, across England and Wales, private water companies are losing over 3 billion liters of clean, treated drinking water every single day. That is roughly 20% of the total supply. It bleeds from a vast, aging network of underground pipes, much of it Victorian-era cast iron, long past its breaking point. It seeps into the soil, forming subterranean plumes of wasted resources, never reaching a single home, farm, or business. Now, here is the part nobody is putting on the news. The crisis is most acute at the heart of the system. Thames Water Utilities Limited is the United Kingdom's largest water and wastewater company. It provides essential services to 15 million people across London and the Thames Valley, a quarter of the UK's population. By early 2024, the company was revealed to be drowning in an £18.3 billion mountain of debt since its privatization in 1989. A move intended to fuel investment and modernization, the company and its peers have paid out billions in dividends to shareholders. The promised infrastructure upgrades never fully materialized. The debt grew. The pipes continued to crack. On January 8, 2024, a new chief executive, Chris Weston, took the helm, inheriting a utility on the brink of financial collapse and facing a tidal wave of public fury over constant sewage spills and leaking infrastructure. He was tasked with fixing a problem decades in the making, just as the climate began to exact its price. The summer of 2026 provided the perfect storm. The crisis did not begin in June or July, it began in May. An unseasonable, late spring heat wave settled over the south of England. At Kew Gardens, in West London, the temperature hit 35.1 degrees Celsius. It was a reading more typical of mid-August, and it caught the system off guard. Water demand surged weeks ahead of schedule. People turned on garden sprinklers, filled paddling pools, and took longer showers, drawing down on reserves that were already under pressure from a drier-than-average spring. On June 18, 2026, the National Drought Group held an emergency summit. The NDG, chaired by the Environment Agency, brings together government departments, water companies, and farming unions to manage water scarcity. The meeting's chair, Helen Wakeham, who also serves as the EA's Director of Water, delivered a stark assessment. She highlighted a severe north-south divide in rainfall. While parts of northern England had received up to 90% of their average spring rainfall, southern England had received as little as 50%. The maps on the screen in their London conference room showed deep red patches of concern over Devon, Cornwall, and crucially, East Anglia. These regions were already on a drought watch list before summer had even officially begun. Helen Wakeham's public statement was cautiously optimistic, a carefully worded plea for conservation. She said, "We enter summer in a generally favorable position, but we can never be complacent. Every drop saved leaves more available for farmers, our local rivers and wildlife." Privately, the models were showing something far more alarming. Then, in the final week of June, the heat dome arrived. It was a vast, stagnant mass of high pressure pulling superheated air north from continental Europe. This was not the gentle warmth of an English summer. This, according to the Met Office, was different. For the first time ever in June, they issued their highest warning, a red extreme heat alert. This level 4 alert, coordinated with the UK Health Security Agency, is not a lifestyle warning. It is a declaration of a national emergency. It signifies a risk of illness and death not just for the vulnerable, but for fit and healthy individuals. A town in Hampshire, Andover, was highlighted by a national newspaper as a heatwave epicenter. Its inland location, far from any coastal breeze, creating a microclimate of stifling radiant heat. In Lingwood, Norfolk, the temperature provisionally hit 37.7 degrees Celsius, shattering previous June records. This is where the mortality statistics from the recent past become so chilling. During the record-breaking summer of 2022, when Coningsby hit 40.3 degrees, there were approximately 3,000 excess deaths recorded in the 65 and over age group alone. The reason is the very architecture of British life. UK homes, built over centuries of cool, damp weather, are designed to trap heat. Brick construction, large south-facing windows, and heavy insulation, all intended to keep warmth in during the winter, transform into convection ovens during a heat wave. With air conditioning units present in fewer than 5% of UK homes, there is often no escape. But the most dangerous phenomenon of the 2026 heat wave was not the daytime peaks. It was what meteorologists call tropical nights. For a night to be classified as tropical, the temperature must not fall below 20 degrees Celsius. In June 2026, the UK recorded average minimum temperatures a full 0.5 degrees Celsius higher than any previous June on record. These relentlessly warm nights are the silent killer. They prevent the human body from recovering from the heat stress of the day. They prevent buildings and infrastructure from shedding their thermal load. Sleep becomes difficult. Physiological strain accumulates. And for the elderly and those with respiratory or cardiovascular conditions, the risk of a fatal outcome multiplies with each passing night. Professor Stephen Belcher, the Met Office's chief scientist, minced no words. "To see temperatures like this in the UK in June is sobering," he stated. Events like this bring home the implications of climate change, with very high temperatures and humidity bringing significant health implications from heat stress. While the health service braced for impact, the water system began to fail. In London, demand spiked to a sustained level of over 2,200 million litres per day. Andrew Tucker, the water demand reduction manager at Thames Water, gave a blunt assessment of the situation on the ground. Demand increased so sharply in some areas, he admitted, that people were using water faster than we could produce and move it through our network. The company was pumping an additional 316 million litres a day into the home counties and the Thames Valley just to try and keep pace. But in some areas, the pressure in the mains was dropping. Water was being drawn from taps faster than the aged constricted pipes could deliver it. The system was running on empty. The crisis spawned a strange technological paradox. As the Victorian-era pipes burst under the strain, Thames Water was deploying one of the most advanced leak detection systems on the planet. In May 2026, After a successful pilot, the company integrated a system called Origin Orbit into its daily operations, developed by the tech startup Origin Tech. The system uses near-Earth observation satellites to scan London's vast underground from space. The satellites are not looking for water itself. They are analyzing the chemical composition of soil and vegetation, using specialized sensors to detect the unique signature of chlorinated drinking water that is leaked into the ground. An AI then analyzes these spectral images, cross-references them with the known map of water mains, and pinpoints the precise location of suspected underground leaks with an accuracy of a few meters. The results of the pilot program were remarkable. Over an 18-week period, the satellites helped identify over 800 previously unknown leaks. Repairing them saved an estimated 8.7 million liters of water per day. The goal, stated by Thames Water, was to use this space-age technology to cut total daily leakage by 100 million liters. It is a stunning contrast. Artificial intelligence in orbit, hunting for cracks in cast-iron pipes laid beneath London's streets during the reign of Queen Victoria. A solution from the 21st century, desperately trying to patch a problem from the 19th. But here's a complication that threatens to render even these advanced efforts insufficient. A new, unaccounted-for demand is placing an immense strain on the UK's water supply, particularly in the Thames Valley area. The thirst of artificial intelligence that power modern AI are incredibly water-intensive. They use vast quantities of it for cooling, running it through evaporative systems to dissipate the immense heat generated by tens of thousands of processors. A single large data center can consume as much water as a small city. As the UK government pushes to become a global AI superpower, these facilities are proliferating often in the very regions already facing the most severe water stress. It is a blind spot in national planning that the Environment Agency is now scrambling to address. The water saved by fixing 100 small leaks could be consumed by a single new data center in a matter of days. The system is chasing its own tail. This new reality is also forcing a difficult national conversation, one that pushes back against a powerful cultural memory. For older generations of Britons, the benchmark for extreme summer weather has always been the legendary heat wave of 1976. For months, from June to August, the country baked. A minister for drought was appointed. Standpipes were installed in streets. For many, the memory of 1976 serves as a reason to dismiss modern heat warnings as overblown. The argument is made that we survived 76. This is nothing new. But that comparison is dangerously misleading. The data shows two fundamentally different types of events. The summer of 1976 was a marathon of sustained heat. For 15 consecutive days, the temperature somewhere in the UK exceeded 32 degrees Celsius. It was a prolonged, slow-burn drought event. The heat waves of the 2020s are different. They are shorter, more violent sprints. They feature explosive spikes in temperature, pushing towards and now past the 40 degrees Celsius mark, a temperature never once recorded in 1976. It is these intense, record-shattering spikes that overwhelm systems built for moderation. A rail network can handle a week at 30 degrees. It cannot handle 3 days at 38. A health service can manage a rise in heat stroke cases over a month. It is swamped when thousands of people need emergency care in 72 hours. The 1976 comparison is not just inaccurate. It is a form of cognitive dissonance that obscures the novel dangers of the current climate. The systemic stakes are now coming into sharp focus. The Environment Agency, the body responsible for protecting England's water resources, has run the numbers. Their projections are stark. They forecast that if major infrastructure upgrades are not made, if leakage is not drastically reduced, and if consumption habits do not change, England could face a daily water shortfall of 5 billion liters by the year 2050. This is not a temporary shortage solved by a hosepipe ban. This is a permanent, structural deficit between the amount of water available and the amount the country needs to function. It is a threat to food security, economic output, and public health. The Met Office projections paint an even more visceral picture. To mark the 50th anniversary of the 1976 heatwave, their climate model simulated plausible future extremes. The conclusion was sobering. By 2056, within the lifetime of many people alive today, a summer temperature of 45 degrees Celsius in the UK is plausible. It is difficult to even comprehend what that would mean. At 45 degrees, tarmacked roads don't just soften. They can melt. Power station outputs drop as their cooling systems struggle. The IT servers that run the modern economy, would begin to fail. The UK Health Security Agency's alert system would be permanently at its highest level, indicating a threat to the life of anyone regardless of age or health, who could not find a cooled space. It is a vision of a country pushed beyond its breaking point. And then there is the existential question buried in the financial reports of the water companies and the infrastructure data of the last 3 decades. The privatization of water in 1989 was sold to the public on a promise of efficiency and investment. The private sector, it was argued, would be able to raise the capital needed to modernize the creaking Victorian system far better than the state. 30 years on, that promise has been broken. Companies like Thames Water have accrued gargantuan debts while simultaneously funneling billions to shareholders and paying large executive bonuses. The investment in core resilience in the reservoirs and national water grids needed for the 21st century did not happen. The result is a brittle, fragile system where the consequences of corporate financial engineering and deferred maintenance are now being passed directly to the consumer in the form of hosepipe bans, depleted rivers, and the looming threat of dry taps. A survey from June 2026 found that 1 in 3 UK adults say they were never taught basic water-saving techniques, creating a culture of overuse that collides disastrously with heat waves. The government's target is to slash average daily water use from 140 liters per person to 122 liters by 2038. It is a crucial goal, but one that feels like addressing a symptom while ignoring the disease of systemic underinvestment. The crisis of Britain's summer is a quiet one. It unfolds not in a single loud explosion, but in a series of cascading interconnected failures. It is the silent buckling of a rail in the afternoon sun. It is the imperceptible drop in water pressure in a suburban home. It is the red alert on a smartphone that signals a hidden danger in the very air you breathe. It is the slow, inexorable rise in overnight temperatures that robs a city of its ability to cool. It is the cognitive dissonance of a supposedly water-rich island confronting drought. As the summer of 2026 drew on, the immediate heat wave subsided, but the underlying conditions remained. The reservoirs were lower than they should be. The soil was parched. The threat had not disappeared. It had merely receded, waiting for the next dome of high pressure to build over Europe. This leaves 3 critical questions hanging over the United Kingdom. How does a nation re-engineer its cities, its homes, and its transport networks for a climate they were never designed to withstand? Can billion-dollar investments in space-age technology outpace the legacy of a century of decay and decades of financial extraction? And what happens to the fabric of a society when a basic necessity, something as fundamental as a reliable supply of clean water, can no longer be taken for granted? Tonight, across London and the Thames Valley, another 50 million gallons of clean, treated water will bleed silently from cracked iron mains into the soil, never reaching a tap. In Exeter, at the Met Office Hadley Center, supercomputers are running millions of lines of code, modeling the trajectory of the next heat wave. And somewhere beneath the streets of the capital, in the aged and decaying labyrinth of pipes, the pressure is dropping, waiting for the next time the sun beats down on an island that is discovering it is no longer prepared for its own weather.